Now, let's assume that another species, whether humanoid or dolphin-like, could have existed millions of years ago. How do we find their traces? There was a Doctor Who episode about a non-human industrial civilization on Earth that existed long before us. These reptiles, called Silurians, were forced deep underground by a catastrophic rise of temperatures on Earth, and there they thrived for centuries. That inspired scientists to create the so-called Silurian hypothesis. If there was an advanced civilization before us, we should find their traces somewhere. Well, let's try. Climatologist Gavin Schmidt and astrophysicist Adam Frank decided to dive into this themselves. Like us, any technologically advanced civilization would be hungry for energy, so they looked for global effects that would leave a widespread mark. For example, hints of large-scale industrial processes, like plants and factories, and their leftovers. Then comes the question of how long these civilizations would last. If they existed for a long time, we should look for long-lasting signs, like residues from burning fossil fuels, mass extinctions, synthetic chemicals not found in nature, and even traces of nuclear fission. Basically, we should search for the same kinds of things that humans are currently leaving behind as evidence of our activities. Unfortunately, this evidence isn't that easy to find. Let's imagine an unsettling scenario if humanity suddenly disappeared. Even though it seems like we've left a lot of changes on our planet, the future civilization millions of years from now would struggle to find any remnants of our existence. Why? Well, our planet has existed for 4.5 billion years. Complex life on Earth has existed for more than 400 million years. Compared to that, our industrial period only lasted around 300 years, and we haven't left any significant traces. Our record of Earth's history is full of gaps, especially the further back you look. The fossil record captures only some things, being very selective and incomplete. On average, one fossil emerges every 10,000 years, and dinosaur footprints are even rarer. Mountains rise, oceans change, and plate tectonics can easily wipe out evidence of entire civilizations. After a couple of million years, chances are any physical signs of a civilization would disappear. In order to find at least something, we have to look for things like odd sediment patterns or unusual isotopic ratios. Also, fossils mostly form in water, leaving us in the dark about creatures on land or in the jungles. So even if there was a technologically advanced society millions of years in the past, and even if they were far more advanced than us, we might struggle to find any clues of its existence. Frank and Schmidt try to understand how we could ever hope to spot signs of them. Discovering actual cities would be the ultimate proof of a Silurian-style civilization on Earth. But Adam Frank isn't too optimistic. Even now, our cities cover less than 3% of the surface, making it easy to miss ancient city ruins. Whether a city survives over tens of millions of years depends on whether the land around it is sinking, getting locked into a rock, or rising, getting worn away by rain and wind. So places like the French Quarter in New Orleans might have a better shot of making it into the geologic record than, say, Haight-Ashbury in San Francisco. When it comes to finding artifacts, the odds are pretty slim as well. No prehistoric iPhone would survive millions of years, fancy glass or not. Finding their fossilized remnants might be a bit more promising, but it's still tricky. Considering modern humans have only been around for about 100,000 years, it's quite possible that we might overlook any traces of an earlier advanced species. There is one thing, though. We could stumble upon their traces in rocks. Our current chaotic era might leave a distinct mark on the Earth's geological history, especially since we're basically experiencing PTM 2.0. I'll get to that in a moment. So they try to look at the changes in the carbon cycle. Humans have been releasing a lot of fossil carbon since the 18th century. This leaves a special mark in the carbon isotope ratio, like a signature that shows the difference between carbon in living things, such as seashells, and carbon in lifeless volcanic rock. Scientists also look for signs in the way sediments are arranged. Large coastal deltas might mean that there were bigger rivers made by folks in this hypothetical civilization. Traces of nitrogen could suggest big-scale farming, where they used a lot of fertilizer. Spikes in metal levels in the sediment could mean runoff from heavy industries. Of course, a single find like that wouldn't tell us anything. Schmidt says the key is to look for multiple signs together. Without clear artifacts, the uniqueness of an event might show in various clues rather than a set of changes linked to a single cause. On a quest for Silurian-style clues, scientists even decided to check the Moon. Some astronomers find it surprising that no one has looked into this before. They even joked about the possibility of dinosaurs building rockets and leaving traces on the Moon or other celestial bodies. These astronomers think that Earth-like planets tend to erase signs of civilizations on their surfaces. So they're exploring the wild notion that these beings might have been space travelers. In that case, remnants of their technology, known as technosignatures, could be lurking not only on our Moon but also on asteroids, or even buried on Mars. There they might endure for millions or even billions of years. Unfortunately, so far, despite digging into the past 380 million years and examining all suspicious events, the researchers haven't found a clear match for a technological civilization. They don't give up, though. Frank calls for more investigation. For example, we could study how modern industrial chemicals stick around in ocean sediments. This, he believes, could help us identify similar chemical traces in the Earth's history. If there are no traces, why do we even bother to find something like that? This research is based on Schmidt and Frank's recent papers. They were delving into the Anthropocene. It's the proposed epoch, dominated by human activities on Earth. It's full of these things called hyperthermals. They're prehistoric events when temperatures on Earth sharply increased over a relatively short time. They're like extreme heat waves from the past. A great example of this is the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, or PETM for short. It happened around 55.5 million years ago and saw a rapid rise in global temperatures. Over 200,000 years, the average temperature on Earth jumped from about 9 to 14 degrees Fahrenheit. We study these hyperthermals to understand how they occurred, from natural causes or human activities. So, these hyperthermals sparked the genesis of Frank and Schmidt's research. To study them, scientists started examining chemical signals and tracers left in rocks. When doing that, Schmidt and Frank uncovered some eerie parallels between all the climate issues we have today and past periods of rapid temperature shifts. There's a close similarity between the PETM and other hyperthermal events. So all this work isn't just about solving a historical mystery. Understanding our impact on the environment can guide us to finding better ways to live in harmony with the planet and avoid becoming a forgotten species in the future. Our Milky Way is filled with lots of planets that could be just right for life, but we don't know if there are other civilizations out there. Earth is the only place we know of with living beings. About 200 years ago, people wondered if there might be civilizations on Mars. Back then, it was a real question. But once we got pictures from space probes, we decided there wasn't any evidence for it, and that idea got stuck in our minds. Now, it's not even considered a valid topic for serious science. It's seen as kind of silly. But no one has set clear limits on what could have happened on our own planet a really long time ago. So, even if there is no proof, we shouldn't throw away the possibility. Don't forget, it took humanity a while to recognize dinosaurs. Maybe Silurians are just patiently waiting for their time.
What if we're not the only technological species on Earth? No, don't side-eye the person next to you. I'm pretty sure they're human. I'm talking about a whole advanced society that might have lived millions of years before us and then vanished. Yeah, it's a bold theory, but it's possible. Which brings up a big question. If they really existed, would we even be able to tell? Because, let's be honest, we are fascinated by the idea of finding intelligent life on other planets. So much so, we almost ignore the possibility that an advanced civilization might have existed right here on Earth. Long before humans evolved. Before dinosaurs even. And there might be hidden clues pointing to them. But where? That's exactly what the Silurian hypothesis tries to figure out. The name Silurian comes from an advanced extraterrestrial race on the TV show Doctor Who, but the real-world idea is a little different. Scientists aren't really asking whether a pre-human civilization existed or not. They're asking something trickier. If they did exist, would we have any way of knowing? In other words, do we even have the necessary tools to find out? You see, it is possible they did exist. Take the human race, for example. We started building industries and using machines back in the 18th century. Our technology has come a long way since then, and it's grown to the point that, well, it's giving us a bit of trouble right now. All that progress is starting to impact the planet's climate and ecosystems. And if things keep going that way, one day, humanity could disappear. Sure, it's an apocalyptic, hypothetical scenario, but hey, it's just to illustrate the theory, okay? So let's picture today's world without humans around to keep things running. At first, nothing would really change, but slowly, little problems would start to snowball. Oil refineries and nuclear plants might keep going for a while until a jam here, a broken valve there, and suddenly disaster strikes with explosions, smoke, and fire tearing through the sky. Over time, pavement would split open, letting tiny green sprouts poke through. A few seasons later, those sprouts would grow into weeds, then bushes, and eventually trees strong enough to tear roads apart. At some point, our concrete jungles would turn into real green ones. And it wouldn't stop there. Bridges, buildings, entire skylines would crumble. Even the things we think will last forever, like plastic, would, over time, be swallowed by the Earth. Fast forward a few 100 million years, and Earth has completely resurfaced. Any direct evidence of our society would be long gone. Fossil evidence would fade away, and thanks to erosion and shifting tectonic plates, even our biggest cities would vanish in the blink of an eye, at least in geological terms. Now imagine Earth becomes home to a brand new intelligent civilization, and the scientists of this future species are trying to prove that we, humans, once existed. Let me tell you, they would have a ton of work ahead of them. That's because without any actual human-made objects left behind, they'd have to look for the geological fingerprints of our activities. In other words, features in rocks or minerals that tell scientists what happened on Earth long ago. They might check for unusual spikes of carbon, for example, but even then, the clues wouldn't be crystal clear, for reasons I will get to in a second. For now, my point is, it'd be just as hard for us to uncover traces of an ancient technological species. We wouldn't find any statues, no buildings, because nothing will be left standing after millions of years. Still, if they existed, they would have had the same basic needs as modern humans. They'd need to generate massive amounts of energy and grow tons of food. And that would have left behind similar geological fingerprints. Things like big spikes in atmospheric carbon, sudden climate shifts, rising sea levels. And if we ever found any of those traces, bingo! That could mean a pre-human intelligent civilization once existed. Sounds easy, right? Well, that's where the Silurian hypothesis comes in. Back in 2018, two scientists decided to put that idea to the test. Physicist Adam Frank and climate modeler Dr. Gavin Schmidt wanted to answer one big question. If an advanced civilization lived on Earth long ago, would we even be able to tell? And the answer is, well, probably not. Finding solid evidence for a civilization that old would be incredibly difficult, and there are two big reasons for that. First, because it's hard to tell when those geological fingerprints are human-made and when they're the result of natural forces. I mean, did the temperature rise during a certain period because of industries, or was it just a natural phenomenon? Here's an example. What's happening to our climate right now looks a lot like certain events in Earth's past called hyperthermals. One of those happened about 55 million years ago, when global temperatures shot up by around 14 degrees Fahrenheit. But hyperthermals usually happen during times of intense tectonic activity, when Earth's plates were shifting and volcanoes were going wild. So in that case, it was natural. But you get the point, right? Maybe there were other events like that in a much older era, that in a rare and unlikely scenario could have been caused by an ancient society, but it would be difficult to tell. There's a reason we might never find their traces. The longer an advanced civilization lasts, the more evidence it leaves behind. But here's the twist. To last that long, they would need to be sustainable. And the more sustainable a society is, the smaller the impact it leaves on the planet. Smaller impact means fewer clues for us to find. Can you see the paradox? The civilizations most likely to survive the longest are the ones that leave the least behind. For example, a society that runs mostly on wind and solar power wouldn't leave nearly as much evidence as one powered by fossil fuels. Okay, so we've got our answer. It would be really hard, if not impossible, to find any evidence that an ancient technological civilization lived here before us. But that doesn't mean they never existed. The truth is, we still don't have proper tools to look that far back into Earth's history in detail. So, maybe we should keep an open mind. Up until now, you've probably pictured this ancient civilization as humanoids, right? You know, 2 legs, 2 arms, walking around like us. But some scientists like to play with a different idea. Maybe we're looking in the wrong place. What if they were sea creatures? I'm talking about cephalopods, ocean animals like octopuses, cuttlefish, and squid. These guys have complex nervous systems and surprisingly sophisticated behavior. They can change color and skin patterns in seconds, send signals like "I'm angry," and even hypnotize their prey. So what if they were the ancient civilization we've been talking about this whole time? Let's start with the light version of the theory. These species could have learned to live together in an organized way, and just like early humans, they might have changed their environment, maybe by farming underwater and hunting some species until they were gone. Maybe that could count as an early stage of a society. Even if that were the case, they never reached what we'd call an advanced stage of civilization. I mean, we don't see squids building spacecraft or octopuses working in IT. They never went through an industrial age or a space age. And if they're not a technological society, then they're not the answer to the Silurian hypothesis. So yeah, we're still left with nothing. And in the scientific community, this whole idea's even got a funny nickname: the most interesting hypothesis that's probably false. But here's the thing. Even if it's a long shot, it still gets scientists asking a big question. What will we humans leave behind millions of years from now? And the answers might actually help us figure out how to look for other advanced species beyond Earth, ones that could have disappeared a long time ago.
There's a place on Earth that looks like it came straight out of the movie Dune. Massive platforms of stone and mud rise in the middle of a scorching desert. And somehow, people manage to survive in such a hostile environment.
Oh, really?
But unlike the movie, this real city in Peru was abandoned over 3,000 years ago and has stayed hidden from us until now. Meet Pañeco. This lost city is located in the Huaura province, north of Lima. After 8 years of excavation and conservation work, some of its secrets have finally been brought to light. It may look eerie and lifeless now, but it wasn't always this way. Experts think this place used to be a busy trading center for ancient Peruvians. In fact, it was part of the oldest known civilization in the Americas, at least as far as we know. And no, they weren't the Mayas or the Aztecs. That's a common mistake. I'm talking about the Corral Supe civilization. This society existed more than 5,000 years ago. That's super old. To put that in perspective, while the Sumerians in Mesopotamia were reaching their peak, and the Egyptians were just starting to build things in Giza, the people in Corral were already building pyramids. Thanks to them, Peru is now seen as one of the 6 places where civilization first began. But unlike the objects we find from ancient Egypt or Mesopotamia, you won't see Corral artifacts in museums, at least not fancy vases covered in mysterious letters, since they didn't know pottery or writing. What they did know was how to build big. They left behind mind-blowing architecture, such as stepped pyramids and huge sunken plazas, like massive open-air arenas big enough to hold hundreds of people. And it's not like they just had one pyramid here and a plaza there. No, as I said, they built big. So far, researchers have found as many as 30 major metropolitan centers across what we now call the Caral region or Peru's north-central coast. You can think of them as full-on cities, with residential areas, several plazas, and ceremonial temples. Their largest pyramid, known as Pirámide Mayor, stands nearly 100 feet tall, with a base covering an area the size of about 4 football fields. That's substantial.
Oh my god!
And building all that surely wasn't easy. It took planning, coordination, and specialists. That suggests that Caral must have had organized labor and strong leadership to pull it off. Despite creating these incredible constructions, Caral cities stayed hidden for thousands of years. And even when researchers first came across the area, it took decades for them to realize how important it really was. They already knew about the ruins back in the 1940s, but it wasn't until the 90s that the first major study of Caral was done. And there's a reason they were ignored for so long. The architecture was so advanced and the proportions so huge that people thought, nah, this has to be something modern. They couldn't have been more wrong, though. And in 2001, studies finally recognized that Caral was the oldest known civilization in the Americas. Archaeologists believe this society existed from around 3,000 to 1,800 years before the Common Era, and for 4,000 years they flourished in complete isolation. Chances are they never met another civilization at all. This may explain why they are considered such a peaceful society. Researchers haven't found any signs of conflict. No fortifications, no battle gear, no trace of fighting. Instead, they seem more focused on commerce and, well, pleasure. Looks like they love music. In one of the temples, for example, archaeologists found 32 flutes made from bird bones. I wonder what that sounded like. Anyway, the Caral lived along 3 rivers, the Fortaleza, the Patavilca, and the Supe. Just like the newly discovered city of Peñeco, this lost city was built on a natural terrace about 1,970 feet above sea level. And no, they didn't do that for the view, it was for security. Building higher up protected them from flooding, since the site sits parallel to the Supe River. Just recently, after 8 years of excavation, experts finally uncovered its beauty. Altogether, they found 18 structures, including temples, residential complexes, and a huge circular plaza. There are also ceremonial halls built on top of large step platforms, along with stairways, courtyards, and carefully designed walls. These structures serve both practical and symbolic purposes. I mean, this was their hotspot, the place where people came together for rituals. Inside one of the structures, researchers uncovered remarkable finds, like sculptures molded in raw clay that portray human figures, animals, and ceremonial objects. They also dug up stone tools, such as grinders, crushers, and hammers. And remember I said they like music, right? Well, the team also found patutus there. That's like an old-school trumpet made of giant shells brought from the Pacific Ocean. Now, if you look at the map, one thing stands out. Peñeco is farther inland than other Caral cities we've discovered. And that's important. The city's location was completely strategic. And that's why it earned the nickname City of Social Integration. There's this theory that says Peñeco played a key role in trading hematite, a mineral used since ancient times to make red pigment. Back then, this was fancy stuff. Peñeco likely served as a hub linking the coastal and highland villages of Supe and Huaura. Maybe they traded hematite for fish and shellfish from the coastal villagers. But now comes the big question. What happened to the people who lived there? Why was Peñeco completely abandoned after thousands of years? Well, that still remains a mystery. There are different theories about why the Caral Supe civilization disappeared and why their most important cities were left abandoned. One of them is the maritime hypothesis. It suggests that societies first developed along the coast, relying heavily on fishing, and only later moved inland. So, in that view, cities were abandoned as people shifted away from them. But that doesn't fit Peñeco, right? I mean, it's way too far inland to count as a seaside city. So it's hard to say what really happened. If you look at their main city, Archaeologists haven't found any solid evidence of one big disaster. No massive earthquake, no huge flood, nothing like that. And the same goes with Piñeco. There's just no sign of a single event that suddenly wiped them out. The likely explanation is a shift in climate. A change in the weather could have caused long droughts that affected local farming. That would have forced people to abandon their cities, like what happened in northern Mesopotamia. Now, can we say that with absolute certainty? Honestly, no. It's much more likely that several distinct factors led to the decline of that society. They might have also faced some internal conflict, issues of leadership or organization, for example. But that's impossible to prove with archaeology alone. Either way, Piñeco is a huge discovery. It gives us new clues to better understand the crisis the Corral civilization faced before its collapse. But for now, many of their secrets are still waiting to be uncovered. And there's still so much for researchers to figure out about how this civilization was born and how it evolved over time. If you want to visit Piñeco, here's some good news. The site has recently been opened to the public. It's about a 4.5-hour drive from Lima, and you can get there either by a private vehicle or through tourist services. Yeah, it's not the easiest journey, but the breathtaking landscapes will make up for it. And if you don't have the time or the money to fly all the way to Peru, don't worry. If you know Spanish, you can explore a virtual museum dedicated to Corral. It features 10 thematic rooms designed to take you on a journey back to the origins of civilization. You'll find photos, videos, infographics. It's a whole immersive experience. Of course, it's not the same as standing on the site itself, but it still offers a fascinating glimpse into the world of the oldest known civilization in the Americas. Well, this eerie Lake Huron discovery may be that it possibly contains the remnants of an entire civilization. Whoa, wait, sounds like Atlantis, right? Well, not exactly. But if there really had been an ancient underwater civilization here, it must have been a pretty advanced one. Around 10,000 years ago, two sharp glassy flakes broke off a stone tool and landed on the ground unnoticed. They stayed buried there for thousands of years, until 2013. Then scientists pulled up a small chunk of mud, about the size of a milk carton, from the bottom of Lake Huron, 100 feet underwater. Inside the mud, they found those same two flakes made of obsidian, a shiny black volcanic glass that forms when lava cools quickly. After careful testing, they realized these flakes came from Central Oregon, which is quite a distance, about 2,500 miles away. They found this prehistoric Great Lakes site on the Alpena-Amberley Ridge, an underwater landform that once connected what's now Michigan and Ontario. Back then, it was dry land. Early humans used it to build traps for animals like caribou as the Ice Age faded and the Great Lakes began to form. Now, obsidian was the high-tech material of ancient times. It's super sharp and perfect for making tools. If you study the flakes carefully, it's obvious that humans made them. You can see where they struck them and the feathered edges that come from being carefully chipped. That means people were not only crafting tools here, but they also had access to obsidian that came from incredibly far away. It was likely possible through a huge trade network that spanned across the continent. For over 100 years, people have guessed that ancient societies might have existed beneath the Great Lakes, but no one had proof. That's why work on this submerged archaeological site is so important. A team of researchers has been trying to learn more about the 10,000-year-old ruins and the civilization that left them behind for over a decade now. Lake Huron's icy water acted like a time capsule that helped preserve things for thousands of years. So far, researchers have found not only unique stone tools, but also ancient trees with roots still intact and underwater peat bogs that preserved seeds and leaves. It was like an Ice Age version of Pompeii, a scene frozen in time. These discoveries are also helping scientists create new technologies and ways to do underwater archaeology. They've engaged sonars, underwater robots, and divers so far. Now, it's pretty cool that the tools they found on the Alpena-Amberley Ridge were way smaller than other tools from the same era found nearby. That might mean a different group of people lived here, and they had their own unique way of life. Even the peat bogs they found, which are about 9,500 years old, hold secrets. They're full of pine needles, seeds, and leaves that could reveal what the environment was like back then. Usually stuff like this breaks down quickly on land, but the cold freshwater preserved it. The Michigan team is working with scientists in Cambridge, England, to extract DNA from the remains. If it works, it could finally confirm what animals lived there, and maybe even more. There are still years of discovery on this prehistoric Great Lakes site ahead. Another famous submerged archaeological site is the lost city of Pavlo-Petri. Archaeologists think it is the oldest sunken city in the world they've found and made official so far. Pavlo-Petri is around 5,000 years old. That means it existed even before the legendary Greek heroes in Homer's stories. Scientists first spotted it way back in 1904, and then mostly forgot about it until 1967, when Nicholas Fleming rediscovered it. He described it as a Bronze Age city now lying under about 10 to 13 feet of water. A year later, he returned with a team of scientists to study the ruins. Over 6 weeks, using just hand tapes and a basic grid, they managed to map out the city. They found that it covered almost 1,000 feet by 500 feet and had at least 15 buildings, courtyards, 5 streets, 2 tombs, and around 37 small stone graves. They also found signs that the ruins continued onto the nearby island of Pavlo-Petri itself. They dug up some amazing pottery, obsidian, and chert blades, and even a tiny bronze figurine that may date all the way back to 2800 BCE. Most of the buildings, though, came from the period between 1650 and 1180 BCE. Then scientists left the site alone again until 2009, when a super team of researchers launched a new 5-year project to really dive deep into the history of Pavlo-Petri. This time, they had digital mapping tools and better diving equipment, so they could explore and even excavate underwater. They found another 97,000 square feet of buildings, including a large hall and hidden streets. Plus, they dug up even more pottery that showed people had been living in the city from about 3000 BCE to 1100 BCE, and that the city once had a population of 500 to 2,000 people. No one knows for sure how the city ended up underwater, but many scientists think it was because of an earthquake, maybe around 1000 BCE, or even as late as 375 CE. Because it's the oldest underwater city ever found, some people even believe Pavlo-Petri might have inspired the legend of Atlantis. Another contestant for the Atlantis title lies near Japan. Back in 1986, a local diver was exploring the waters near the Ryukyu Islands when he found a giant structure made of perfectly shaped steps and sharp edges. It was 82 feet underwater. Today, the Yonaguni Monument is one of the most mysterious underwater sites on the planet. The structure is nearly half a football field in size. It looks like a massive stone pyramid with layers of platforms and steps stacked one on top of another. No one really knows where it came from or who built it. Some experts think the monument might be more than 10,000 years old, which would make it older than the Egyptian pyramids. One theory is that it could be the last remains of a lost civilization called Mu, a mythical Pacific society kind of like Atlantis. Others believe an ancient culture that lived in Japan as early as 12,000 BCE might have built it. But many scientists and geologists are skeptical about this possible underwater ancient civilization, even though Yonaguni has narrow passageways, arched openings, and right angles that almost look like city blocks. They say that the site looks a lot like natural rock formations, like the Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland, for example. The whole monument is still connected to a bigger chunk of bedrock, which means it wasn't built piece by piece. And the way the layers of rock are stacked probably has more to do with earthquakes and tectonic movement. It's located in the very active Pacific Ring of Fire. One marine geologist kept going back down there, and every time he found something new. He says he spotted tool marks in the rock, symbols carved into stone faces, and even rock formations shaped like animals. He believes these carvings point to a culture that came from mainland Asia. He said he had identified 10 different structures off Yonaguni, including a ruined castle, a triumphal arch, 5 temples, and even a huge museum. These buildings seem to be connected by roads and channels, and some parts are surrounded by what could be giant stone walls. The explorer believes the city is at least 5,000 years old, based on stalactites found in underwater caves nearby, which would have only formed after the caves flooded. His supporters say they have never seen an earthquake create shapes like this, above or below water. But skeptics blame it all on erosion and insist that whirling underwater currents and sea creatures left holes in the rock. Now, if you want to form your own opinion about it, the spot is open for visitors, and it's definitely a super fun diving experience.
About 14,000 years ago, some super skilled builders from another planet landed on Earth. Their mission was to help build a massive stone complex with perfectly interlocking blocks. They used some advanced technology, centuries ahead of their time, and once the job was done, they disappeared without a trace. This is not a sci-fi plot, but one of the theories trying to explain the mystery of Puma Punku. Scientists don't officially accept it, but they still don't know for sure how, when, and who built this impressive construction. Puma Punku is part of the ancient city of Tiwanaku, near Lake Titicaca in Bolivia. Tiwanaku is an important place in Inca traditions. They believed it to be the place where the world was created. Historians believe Puma Punku was built around 536 AD. The first Europeans discovered it in the middle of the 16th century. At the heart of Puma Punku, there is a huge, terraced platform filled with massive stone blocks, some as big as a school bus. The largest one weighs a jaw-dropping 131 tons. That's heavier than 20 elephants. Even the smaller rocks are as big as a couch. Archaeologists believe there were at least 5 big gateways, as well as several smaller ones that may have been part of a grand monument. The site is built using 2 types of stone, red sandstone and andesite, which is one of the hardest rocks on Earth. The 8-shaped blocks of the construction fit together like puzzle pieces. They all look the same, as if they were mass-produced in a factory. But that should have been impossible for an ancient civilization. Even the smaller rocks are as big as a couch. These blocks were carved with precise holes and grooves to fit together. Builders made perfectly straight lines, cut identical angles, created smooth surfaces, and drilled holes. Some scientists believe they may have used advanced techniques, but there's no record of the tools they used. It took another 1,000 years before other civilizations could match this level of precision. One of the biggest mysteries is how these enormous stones were transported. Puma Punku sits high up in the mountains at 12,600 feet above sea level. So high that even trees don't grow there. The builders didn't have wheels, cranes, or modern machines. Yet somehow, they moved these heavy blocks miles from their original locations. Some scientists think they used llama skin ropes and ramps, but no one really knows for sure. The most commonly accepted version is that the Tiwanaku civilization, which thrived in the region between 500 and 1000 CE, built this impressive site. The complex was enormous and had many different areas. A western court, a large open area in the center, and an eastern court that was surrounded by walls. Long ago, it must have been incredibly beautiful, with polished metal plaques shimmering in the sunlight, brightly colored fabrics and ceramics decorating the buildings, and people in elaborate costumes walking through the plaza. But something doesn't add up here, as the Tiwanaku people never wrote down how they built Puma Punku. They would have probably left some clues if they had accomplished something like this. Plus, the Tiwanaku people didn't have the high-tech equipment needed to carve and move giant stone blocks with perfect precision. The architectural historians who first studied the place professionally concluded that a hammerstone couldn't have done such a fine job. They found no metal tools that were used in the construction process. That's why they suggested they might have used some unconventional tools the historians didn't even recognize as tools. There's a theory that these ancient builders might have had a way to soften stone to make it easy to carve before it hardened again. Or maybe they poured liquid stone into molds, just like we make concrete today. If it's true, this would mean an advanced civilization existed in South America long before we thought. Some researchers even think it had to do with the theory of Atlantis or other lost civilizations that may have had immense knowledge before a global catastrophe wiped them out. Local legends say that powerful deities used incredible powers to lift and shape the massive stone blocks. And some people believe Pumapunku was so advanced that the builders must have had help from visitors from outer space. The perfect cuts and massive stones look like something from modern construction. The supporters of this theory also say that some carvings at Tiwanaku show figures wearing helmet-like shapes, so they could be left by space travelers. Scientists from the University of California, Los Angeles, decided to officially debunk this theory. They created a digital model of Pumapunku using super precise measurements from historical records. Then, they used a 3D printer to make a miniature version of the site at 4% of its original size. Once the pieces were printed, the team sorted them by size, shape, and design, like a giant puzzle. They noticed that some blocks had special grooves for holding metal clamps, and others had ornamental carvings. When they finished their model, they realized one of the buildings had a very familiar design. It looked just like structures from two nearby sites. This was solid proof that Pumapunku was built by humans, not visitors from outer space. Over the centuries, people stole stones from Pumapunku and moved them around. This made things even more confusing for archaeologists. UCLA team created a digital archive, so researchers all over the world can now study the site without traveling to Bolivia. So maybe we'll hear about the new twists in this mystery soon. Another construction from the past that still impresses us with extreme precision is the Serapeum of Saqqara, a burial place built around 3,000 to 3,500 years ago. A French scientist accidentally discovered it in 1850. Inside the Serapeum, he found a long underground hallway. On both sides of the hallway, there were giant stone rooms, and inside those rooms, there were huge granite sarcophagi. These sarcophagi were not built for people, but for the sacred Apis bulls. These bulls were treated like royalty, as the people believed they were chosen by deities. The Egyptians believed these bulls were the incarnations of the deity Ptah and had magical powers to protect their kingdom. Some of the stone boxes inside the Serapeum weighed around 70 tons. They were made with perfectly straight angles and smooth surfaces. Scientists noted roller marks on the floor and found wooden winches with levers, which the Egyptians likely used to move the sarcophagi. Since the burial chambers were lower than the hallway floor, workers filled them with sand, rolled the sarcophagus into place, and then slowly removed the sand to lower it perfectly into position. A stone inscription found in the Serapeum said it took 28 days just to move one of these stone boxes. Even though these sarcophagi were meant for bulls, they were way bigger than needed. Pharaohs, who were the rulers of Egypt, were buried in tiny coffins. So it's really weird that these boxes were so enormous. Another question is why they used granite, which is so hard to carve, instead of limestone. Some people believe the stone boxes weren't just tombs. They might have been ancient energy generators. The Egyptians knew about fermentation. If someone placed food or meat inside a perfectly sealed granite box and let fermentation happen, pressure would build up inside. Granite contains quartz, a special crystal that creates electricity when squeezed. As pressure increased, the box's lid could pop open, releasing gas. Ancient drawings found in the Serapeum show stones stacked on top of the boxes, which might have been used to make the lids even heavier and help produce more electricity. Thousands of years later, when explorers opened these boxes, they only found bull bones, maybe because all the organic material had disappeared over time. Scientists still aren't sure if the massive stone boxes were actually ancient energy systems, so the mystery lives on.
There you are, trekking across a desert on foot. It's hot, you're terribly thirsty, and now you gotta walk around this stupid wall. Wait, a wall in the middle of a sandy, lifeless nowhere? Exactly, a wall in the northern Saudi desert. Archaeologists have just made a super exciting discovery, and what they found was not just a single wall. No, it was a whole ancient walled city that might date back to 2400 BCE. They think this place was home to around 500 people and could have been used for 1,000 years. This discovery is groundbreaking. It means that the area could have been way more advanced than anyone expected. The city was well organized, with different zones for living, towers and strong walls for protection, and different sections for all kinds of daily life. This ancient city, now called Al-Natab, was basically an oasis town, and it's great since it can give us a peek into what life might have been like in this desert thousands of years ago. Apparently, they had clearly separated areas, like residential sections, a cemetery, farmland, and even a town center. This oasis city, found in the Khaybar area, is the first big organized settlement from the 2nd or 3rd millennium BCE that researchers have uncovered in northwestern Arabia. The first survey showed that this town, which covered about 6 acres, had several districts, including the residential area, the cemetery, and the legal one, with courts. The houses were set up in neat rows, all connected by small roads. Those streets kept the residential area separate from the rest of the town. Back then, most people in this region were nomadic herders, always moving around. But archaeologists have been sure that during the Bronze Age, northwest Arabia had small walled towns and oasis centers scattered across it. These connected oasis towns were unique, offering secure places for people to live, store goods, and trade. They started showing the beginnings of urban planning, which hints that people of that time were already starting to settle down and organize communities more seriously. The research team estimated that there were about 50 homes in Al-Natab, but that number could go up to 70 as they keep digging. They think that a few hundred people lived there, and probably one of the coolest things is that some houses went up to 3 stories tall. Built on a slope near a couple of major trade routes, this city was set up in a prime spot. Now, one of the most impressive things about this place is its water supply. The oasis had springs and aquifers, which are underground water sources, and such conditions were perfect for farming. Those water sources meant residents could grow their own food, making the town self-sufficient. The outer walls probably helped control who could enter the town and get access to its resources. This settled way of life was an impressive shift from nomadic living to a more agro-pastoral lifestyle, which means a mix of farming and herding animals. Another find that supports this theory is a bunch of tools like grinding stones, mortars, and pestles discovered inside the town. People there must have ground grains and prepared food. They had a diet of cereals, meat, and milk from animals they raised themselves. These astonishing findings show that the inhabitants of the town could easily feed themselves and were surprisingly advanced for that time. Thanks to better access to Saudi Arabia in the past couple of decades, archaeologists now have a much clearer picture of what life there was like thousands of years ago. The most exciting thing is that Al-Natab might have been part of a whole network of similar fortified oasis towns spread across the region, and all of these connected sites could show us how trade routes and small settlements worked together at that time in that arid area. Now, at the same time, this recent discovery isn't the only one that has the scientific world buzzing with excitement. How about we visit Egypt and see for ourselves? After all, archaeologists have just found a stash of ancient Egyptian and Greek treasure underwater. They were exploring the lost city of Thonis Heraklion off the coast of Egypt, which sank more than 1,000 years ago. This city was legendary, and nobody even knew where it was until it was rediscovered in 2000. Now they're uncovering more and more, and on this dive, they found a pile of gold and silver treasures. Those were probably used in rituals to bless Egyptian pharaohs when they took the throne. The researchers even found an ancient Greek temple dedicated to Aphrodite and some super old Greek weapons. Frank Gaudio, the lead archaeologist, said it was astonishing that those delicate objects had survived the disaster that brought the city down. Back in its prime, Thonis Heraklion was one of the biggest port cities in the Mediterranean. It was a huge center of social life and was the main entry point for ships from Greece coming into Egypt. But tragically, due to rising waters, earthquakes, and a catastrophic tidal wave, the soil underneath the city literally turned into mush, and then the entire city sank into the Mediterranean. It was forgotten until Gaudio's team found it in 2000. Since then, they've been uncovering new parts of the city and piecing together its history little by little. If a lost underwater city doesn't seem impressive enough, we can travel to the Amazon. The discovery made there is truly mind-boggling. For centuries, people have talked about lost cities deep in the Amazon, like El Dorado, that mythical city of gold that lured Spanish explorers into the jungle. A lot of them never came back. Then, in the 1900s, a British explorer named Percy Fawcett went searching for what he called the lost city of Z, and he too disappeared. But now, finally, scientists have actually found proof that those lost cities in the Amazon were real all along. A team of scientists use a tech called LiDAR, which basically allows you to see through thick jungle from above by bouncing light beams off the ground. They flew over the jungle in Bolivia in a helicopter about 650 feet up and mapped out those hidden ancient cities. What they found were ruins of a huge urban settlement built by the Kasarabi people who lived there from 500 to 1400 CE. And it wasn't just a couple of buildings here and there. No, the LiDAR maps revealed massive urban centers, pyramids, platforms, roads, canals, and causeways, all carefully laid out. Turns out the Amazon wasn't just an untouched jungle. It was once home to big, complex cities. A scientist from the German Archaeological Institute explained that Europeans had long ignored the possibility of ancient Amazonian cities, but the LiDAR maps showed they were wrong. The new maps have revealed 26 sites, including 11 that no one even knew existed. Researchers have discovered two main city sites, Landivar and Kotoka. They had massive moat causeways stretching out like spokes on a wheel, linking the main cities with smaller surrounding settlements. Some of the canals even connected the cities to rivers and a big lake, which allowed water to flow through the area. Over the years, scientists found scattered ruins all over this region, but the thick jungle made it nearly impossible to connect the dots and see if or how they were related. With LiDAR, the whole layout came to life, showing that those sites were part of a much larger organized urban system. It's now also clear that the sites had a greater meaning, since everything is lined up in a way that could be symbolic of the spiritual beliefs of the inhabitants. The Kasarabi culture isn't as famous as the Maya, but they had a thriving society in an area that faced huge challenges, like yearly flooding. And although the nearby Andes had their own monumental sites, the Kasarabi were doing something absolutely unique. They even had reservoirs to store water, which suggests they might have been dealing with occasional droughts, which is pretty unusual for the Amazon. Actually, those terrible droughts could be why the Kasarabi eventually left their cities around 1400 CE.
There's this interesting ancient site near St. Louis, Missouri, that a lot of people don't know about. It's called Cahokia, and it used to be a huge city with up to 20,000 people living there back in the 11th century. It's full of these massive earthen mounds that were built by hand, and the biggest one is still there today, at the Cahokia Mound State Historic Site. Even though we don't know everything about this civilization, researchers have been able to piece together some information from the remains they've found. For starters, they found some pretty old teeth at this site. After studying their appearance and structure, scientists suggest that a lot of different indigenous groups lived there. About a third of them came from other areas in the middle of the continent. which they figured out by studying the different levels of various substances in the teeth. And get this, the way the mounds are arranged shows that this was actually a planned-out city, not just a bunch of villages grouped together. The rulers lived on top of the mounds, while everyone else lived in other structures. It's amazing to think that they were doing things like farming, hunting, logging, pottery, and weaving, all within this one giant city. Right in the middle of Cahokia, there was this giant mound that was about 100 feet tall. And around it, there was this huge wooden fence. Inside the fence was the city center, which had a big open space called a plaza. Archaeologists think that the plaza was designed to represent the 4 cardinal directions of the world. It was like the people who built it wanted to create a place that was in harmony with the universe. The center of the city was where they held ceremonies and events, and it was such a big deal that people from outside Cahokia would come to be a part of them too. What became of this city? Hard to tell. Some people think that the reason it fell apart is that they cut down too many trees and the land got all messed up. Other scientists believe that's not true because the soil was still in pretty good shape after the city was gone. The Europeans were not even around at that time, so they couldn't have influenced the downfall of Cahokia either. There's also one theory that suggests there were fights with other communities that caused the city to collapse. These days, there are over 65 preserved mounds, and you can even climb the steps of the tallest one. The best part is that local authorities are thinking of making it a national park, so you should totally plan to visit before it gets too crowded. Mohenjo-Daro is another lost ancient city that's still surrounded by mystery. Located in modern-day Pakistan, it was a city that flourished during the Bronze Age, and it was extremely advanced for its time. It had things like water systems and fancy architecture that other cities didn't have back then. Despite these features, it's not as well known as other ancient cities, like those in Egypt or Mesopotamia. What's even weirder is that at some point, the city was abandoned, and no one knows why. Archaeologists found the city in 1911, but it took a while for them to realize how important it was. Eventually, they uncovered a lot of really interesting things about the city, like its advanced sanitation system. Excavations uncovered over 700 wells, as well as private baths and a large communal bath. Remarkably, even private homes had toilets, and waste was efficiently disposed of through a citywide sewage system. They also had a lot of trade connections and made some really beautiful objects, like pottery, jewelry, and figurines that were sold all over the region. Despite its amazing culture and knowledge, scientists have yet to figure out why the city was abandoned. Some people think changes in the nearby river might have had something to do with it. The writings that the people of Mohenjo-Daro left behind are still a complex code, even for the most skilled specialists, making it even harder to piece together their history. Have you heard of the lost city of Kolmanskop? It used to be a small settlement in the Namib Desert. Legend has it that it got its name from a man named Coleman who got stuck in the local dunes and was never seen again. But that's not the interesting part. In 1908, a railway worker found a shiny stone and showed it to the chief railway foreman, who turned out to be a hobby mineralogist. They discovered it was a diamond, and soon, Kolmanskop became the richest town in Africa and one of the richest places in the world. It had luxurious stone houses, a school, a hospital, and even an ice factory to produce ice for fridges. The hospital had the first X-ray machine in southern Africa, which was supposedly used to check if workers were illegally swallowing diamonds. Its popularity began to decline in the late 1920s when another diamond-rich location was discovered nearby. Most of the inhabitants soon began to flee the city in search of a better life, leaving the buildings abandoned. In 1938, all machinery was taken south and the town was left to the desert. The last inhabitant left Kolmanskop between 1956 and 1960. The hot climate and low humidity have preserved the structures over time, and tourists can now visit this desert ghost town. You've surely heard about this next ancient city, Machu Picchu. It's this incredible ancient location in Peru. It stretches across a huge piece of land in the Andes Mountains and sits high above sea level. It's even considered one of the wonders of the modern world. But here's the thing. Scientists aren't exactly sure what it was used for. It could have supported up to 750 people, but there aren't a lot of human clues left behind. Some people think it was more of a spiritual or ceremonial place, while others believe it may have been like a fancy spa retreat for the nobles. The extensive terraces might mean it was used for crop testing or as a trading hub. And there's even a theory that it was used as a prison because they found a cell-like area too. It's amazing that even today, archaeologists and historians are still puzzled about how it was built. Did you know that they probably didn't even use wheels for transportation? And those massive granite rocks were somehow pushed up the steep Andean mountains, even though most of them weighed a lot. Some historians think that hundreds of people worked together to push each rock up the peak. The huge stones at Machu Picchu are also so close together that you can't see any cracks between them. It's pretty cool because it also makes the area safe during earthquakes, which is important since Peru is a shaky country. But how did the stones stay put during all those quakes? They actually move a little bit, but then they go back to their original spot, almost like they're dancing. Some people think wet wooden wedges were used to keep them in place, but that doesn't really add up, considering how big the structures are. Locals back then also seem to have built Machu Picchu without using any pack animals or iron tools. They had to sculpt and put everything together using mostly their hands. Plus, the citadel is built on a fault, so they had to move a bunch of stone and earth to make it flat. Scientists also think that the real construction is actually underground because of the deep foundations and drainage system. In fact, there's a hidden water system that was just recently discovered using 3D scanning. They didn't even use mortar to put the granite blocks together. They were so precise that you can't even fit a sheet of paper between them. One theory suggests that people that lived there used stone tools made of a harder material than the stone they were cutting.